Good morning everyone, my name is Michelle. I hope you're doing well. Welcome to another video. It is Thursday morning, the 24th of April. And we're going to Florida today, to the case of Stephan Sterns. Don't like talking about this guy. The mere mention of this guy's name, the mere glance at his face makes me feel sick. This is a vile monster. And you can come at me, and I'm not sure that many will, but you could come at me and say, he's innocent till proven guilty in a court of law and judged by a jury of his peers. Okay, yes, constitutionally, he is innocent. However, this guy is as guilty as sin. Yesterday, there was a court hearing, somewhat overshadowed by the spectacle that is the Karen Read case, and I will be live later on this morning, my time, very early for most of you, but you can always watch it on the replay. Going to be doing a trial recap of day 2 in Karen Read over on my other channel, Michelle Walks. So go and sub up there, put your notifications on, so you don't miss any of the trial recaps I'm going to be doing during the course of Karen Read's trial. So, Stephan Sterns, this hearing was to suppress vital evidence. His defence are doing the only thing they can possibly do to get him off the SA charges. This hearing is pertaining to the SA trial only, not the homicide trial, the SA trial, which is coming up very soon, scheduled for 5th of May. Now, whether they'll change it, I don't know, but it's very, very soon. So this was a motions hearing to suppress, so to disallow the phone evidence, that horrible, horrible evidence. They're trying to get that suppressed because, fruit of the poisonous tree. Let's discuss. Okay, so what Stephan Sterns' defence are claiming is that the cops, 2 detectives that interviewed him on the 27th, they spent quite a bit of time with Stephan on the 27th. If you remember, 13-year-old Madeline Soto was reported missing after school on the 26th of February 2024. Her mother, Jen Soto, went to pick her up from school and she wasn't there. She wasn't at her grandma's place either, so they called the cops. What ensued was a couple of days of total lies from Stephan Sterns. Stephan Sterns was the last person to see Maddie because Jen Soto needed a good night's sleep, so she sent Stephan and Maddie to sleep in an upstairs bedroom, room number 4. Yes, Stephan Sterns was sleeping with a 13-year-old girl under the nose, known by that little girl's mother. Whether she knew about the abuse is an open question. I think she did, but that's just me. Jen Soto isn't facing any charges at this current time, so all eyes are on Stephan. So what did Stephan claim? Well, he claims that he took her to school, dropped her off at a church near the school, watched her walk away, messed in her backpack a little bit and walked away. Listen.
Do you mind if I just take a picture of your history?
Yeah, that's fine.
And that time would have been, you said around
8:20-ish, 8:30, sometime between 8:20 and 8:40.
What time does she go into class?
She has to be there no later than 9:15. Doors open at 8. Doors open at 9, I think. And then school officially starts around 9:20 or 9:28, I think.
And when you dropped her off, is that earlier than typical, later than typical, around the same time?
Earlier than typical. We had made really good time that morning, and with the subtraction of McDonald's, we had more time than usual.
Yeah, so that was the evening of the 27th of February. He's talking to Detective Tadler and Detective Acosta. While Acosta is talking to Stephan, Tadler is going through Stephan's phone. He gave her permission to go through his phone. But what his defence are claiming, that it was a creep. So she first asked him whether she could check his maps, because what they were learning was the direction that Stephan said he went. He didn't go there. He was caught on traffic cameras in locations where he wouldn't have gone. And he lied. He said, oh, I had to go back for the key fob and then go all the way back. Look, it was obvious lies. They hadn't done this yet at this moment, but when they got the surveillance video from the apartment complex, Maddie was propped up in the front seat. She was already dead, and Stephan was driving about with her, absolute consciousness of guilt. He was trying to get caught on cameras that made it look like Maddie was in the car and she was fine. She wasn't fine. She'd been strangled at some point overnight. She'd been strangled. So Detective Tadler and Detective Acosta, they were very nice to Stephan. They were in the parking lot of the apartment complex because Stephan and Jen weren't allowed to go in the apartment because it was being searched. Stephan's dad's car that Stephan was using, the Lincoln, that was also a no-go area. But they were stood kind of near the Lincoln. He wasn't handcuffed. It was a gentle conversation. But what his defence are claiming is that Tadler, she asked him whether she could look at his maps, and then she started to ask him if she could take a photo of his history, and he said yes. Provided her his passcode, he was absolutely fine with it. Absolutely fine with it. She even gave him his phone back at one point, and then asked him for it again. He put his passcode in, let her look through his phone, and then she asked him if she could take the phone overnight so that they could download the contents. Stephan agreed. He agreed to all of this. But the defence are claiming that it was a creep, and he couldn't refuse because, there was cops around doing searches and he would have felt intimidated and he couldn't refuse. Yeah, he could. The defence say, well, she gave him an ultimatum. She said, we can either take the phone voluntarily or we'll get a search warrant. Of course they would have got a search warrant if he said no. Of course they would. They got probable cause. He was the last person to see a missing girl. She was missing at that point. She was only found on the Friday. So this was the Tuesday, the 27th. She was found on Friday, the 1st of March, 20 miles away. So the state are claiming that the detectives had probable cause to suggest that Stephan Sterns would try to hide evidence. We know he tried to hide evidence. Why? Because he'd factory reset his phone. On the very day that Madeline went missing, he'd factory reset his phone, saying, this is hilarious, saying that he did an update and, by accident, he factory reset his phone. You can't accidentally factory reset your phone. Tadler found this when she looked at his history and there was no call history, like only for that current day. Unbeknownst to Stephan, what had actually happened was he deleted a ton of images of him and Madeline, photos and videos, just horrific abuse that had started, according to the phone, in 2019. Madeline would have been 8 years old. What had happened is Stephan factory reset the phone, thought it got rid of all the photos and the videos, but because he had all of those photos and videos backed up in cloud storage, the phone, when he put his Google password in, the phone repopulated. So all of the images were right there. They were right there. He thought he would get away with it. He thought there was nothing on his phone. So they had very good reason to believe that Stephan would try to hide evidence, that he'd start deleting stuff off his cloud, which would then delete off his phone. So they took his phone to download, put it in airplane mode, so if he tried to delete stuff from his cloud, it wouldn't affect the current phone. They thought on the feet, they did what was needed, they did not break his constitutional rights, he did not have his phone unfairly seized, he gave consent, and he believed he was in the clear. But we know that Stephan isn't clever. He's a big man baby. That's all he is, a little whiny man baby. Okay, this is the state, and I'm going to play you a couple of minutes of this. Somehow the camera cut off nearly 3 hours in. I mean, they weren't quite finished though, so I think they had some kind of camera issue. But this is the last thing the state said.
So it's at that point that there's a seizure. There's some other information that's ascertained by law enforcement, and then they do a second interview with Mr. Sterns. The second interview begins at 12:16 a.m. and almost immediately jumps into addressing consent to forensically download the phone. It's not very long after their initial introductions on the audio recording. She says, I told you I was going to hold on to the phone. We would like to download your phone. Is this something that I have your consent to do, or do I need to get a search warrant for your phone? The state's position is the way that that statement is phrased, it is clear to a reasonable person that the defendant had the opportunity to refuse to consent, because either the defendant can consent. If the defendant does not consent, law enforcement ultimately would seek a search warrant. The defense wants to call that an ultimatum. The state's position is that it is advising the defendant very clearly that he has the ability to object or not allow consent for the forensic download.
And they would have probable cause. A judge would sign a search warrant for that phone all day and all night. A judge would agree to that. There's probable cause. Little Madeline is missing. He slept with Madeline by his own admission overnight. She went missing when he supposedly took her to school, and he lied about his route. They very soon after this found the surveillance video from the apartment complex. But if they'd waited for a search warrant, those vital few hours might have allowed Stephan to realise that the phone had repopulated via his Google Cloud, and he would have started deleting stuff off his cloud. So they had to act. They had to act quickly, and he gave consent. The important thing is his property wasn't unfairly seized. He gave consent willingly, and he thought he'd beaten them anyway. So no.
No question that law enforcement was seeking a complete download and to go through the entirety of the phone by the way that that conversation is had. Because he ultimately answers that question affirmatively, and then she follows up, you're okay with us going through your phone? To which the defendant responds yes, and then he ultimately provides his passcode to the cell phone.
Look, if the judge says, look, he's had his constitutional rights violated, they unfairly seized his phone, he was just this victim of these two aggressive detectives. They were very, very nice to him. Very nice to him. Didn't believe him, but they were very nice to him. He could have refused. He had that out. They did what they needed to do. So if this judge says, oh yeah, he's had his constitutional rights violated, I will eat my hats, and I've got quite a few hats. I'll eat all of my hats if this judge suppresses this information. But it's the only thing that his defence can do. It's the only play they've got. It's the key evidence. It's the evidence that will sink him. Absolutely sink him. So, look, I don't blame him. They're doing their job. But so is the judge. He's doing his. And in my opinion, there's no way that this judge will agree to the suppression of this evidence. So, wait for the result. But I'll eat all of my hats if this judge says, yeah, I'm going to suppress this. It ain't going to happen, I'm telling you. Alright guys, let me know what you think about this disgusting individual in the comments. Did he have his constitutional rights violated or not? Let me know. I'll see you soon. Bye guys.